We have an excellent event here for you today. We have four very knowledgeable panelists that I'll introduce in a moment. But this is kind of the culmination of Civic Engagement Week, which if you haven't been around campus and seen some of the voter registration tables, we have been trying to get out the information, trying to get people registered to vote. And then also we will have a voter registration opportunity next Monday from 10 to 4 on the plaza. We'll have the Michigan Department of State. They'll have their mobile office there as well. So if you aren't registered to vote yet, please make sure you do that no matter what side you take on any of these issues. So a little bit of background. So this event was kind of developed as an idea to meet a number of goals, meeting again kind of our hopes for increasing civic engagement, knowledge on the topic. We also try to have a number of opportunities for students in different educational areas, including drug, alcohol, substance abuse, that sort of thing. So it was sort of built a little bit out of that, and then it kind of turned into a broader, let's talk about an issue. And so we know that a lot of students are talking about this issue already on their own, so we wanted to have an opportunity to bring folks in with different expertise on all sides of the topic and kind of discuss it. And so again, having a smaller group, that's not so bad because we'll be able to answer all of your questions that you might have at the end. It's also important to note that this event is not trying to push you in one way or another, so we try to get a pretty balanced panel and folks in a lot of different areas. GRCC is not taking a stance on this issue. We're bringing in knowledgeable folks to talk about it so that you all can make your own decisions. So really excited that you're here, taking this step and educating yourself on the issues. And it's also important to note that this is a state ballot proposal, and so this is still going to be illegal after November federally, and that still has some implications for the community college level. As a public institution, it still would be illegal on this campus, so that's another thing that's important to note. All right, with that, I'm going to introduce our panel, and we will get started with the format. So we have Chris Becker, the Kent County prosecutor here. Dr. Sandra Detman, an addiction medicine specialist and director at the Detman Center. Paul Farage, owner at the Society of Healing Arts, also a GRJC alum, now GRCC as you know it. And then also Jocelyn Monahan, a lawyer and volunteer with the ACLU. So format, introductions first, and then we'll go into the discussion. We've got 10 questions here. Each candidate will get about 1 to 2 minutes or so per question. We'll try to keep the time just to make sure that we get through the event and all the questions. We'll also have about 15 minutes for Q&A at the end for any questions that you all have that we may have missed in the discussion. And then we'll give everyone a chance to do some closing remarks at the end. So want to, lay some ground rules. Again, this is a celebration of freedom of speech and the right to vote. We're trying to focus this on being a fair, balanced discussion and focusing on the educational view so that you can decide for yourselves come November 6th. We're also made sure to give the panelists the questions in advance, so they knew that these questions were coming. We're not trying to surprise anybody, so they had the questions in advance and we're able to work through them, and each panelist will get equal time for each question, 1 to 2 minutes or so. I'll try to keep track informally, but I'll start to nudge you a little bit if you keep going over on time. All right. I am also not an expert panelist, so I had to write my questions down. So there will be, a 15-minute Q&A at the end. This is a panel discussion and not a debate, so we won't have rebuttals back and forth. Each panelist will have their time to speak and not interjecting on other panelists' time. And so we'll start alphabetically by last name, starting with Chris and going on backwards, and then we'll kind of cycle through so that everyone gets equal time and equal starting time. And you have the option to pass on any given question if you don't have anything more to add on the conversation or what have you. And lastly, this is a discussion of the ballot proposal for passing recreational marijuana in Michigan. We're not discussing the other ballot proposals, candidates. We're trying to avoid politically charged statements in this conversation, so stick to the topic at hand. All right, with that, then I will pass it on to the experts. So I wanted to give everyone a chance to introduce themselves a little bit more in depth beyond what I introduced, and then also to state why you're interested and engaged in this issue. So starting with Chris.
Sure, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. As you said, my name's Chris Becker. I'm the Kent County Prosecuting Attorney. I've been the elected prosecutor for a year and a half now, but I've been in the prosecutor's office for about 23 years. And why I'm interested, obviously, this is a big topic, a big change in the law should it become the ballot proposal passing. It's going to have direct implications on how law enforcement works, how law enforcement acts, and so that's why I'm interested in it. So keep it short. That's pretty much it.
Thank you. Dr. Detman.
Sandy Detman. I'm an addiction medicine specialist, so I use medication-assisted treatment to help people struggling with dependence or addiction to alcohol and drugs. I'm obviously very interested in this because my job as a MD is to protect the health and well-being of our citizens, and my job as an addiction medicine specialist is to keep people alive because so many people are dying from drug use.
Paul?
My name is Paul Farage. I am the owner of the Society of Healing Arts Institute. We are an alternative health clinic, but we specialize in medical marijuana certifications. We do not distribute marijuana in any way. We are a doctor's office. The city of Grand Rapids doesn't allow marijuana distributing anyway. And they will in November. Obviously, the reason I'm involved in this is because that's part of my industry. I'm involved in a lot of different ways through law enforcement and education as well. And this whole ballot proposal, for me, it's a big change for all of us in the state of Michigan. And what it really brings about is that we have a situation where we have been our entire lives, my entire life, for the past 80 plus years, we have been told something about this plant, marijuana, how dangerous it is and how destructive it could be. But we've been misled to a degree that we don't even realize just how much brainwashing and misinformation we've been given. And even with medical marijuana being legal, I have still seen lots of arrests, lots of legal issues that written right in the law, it says you cannot do this to a person who is using medical marijuana, but yet those laws are completely disregarded. And I'm sure that several of the laws will continue to be disregarded, but this is a major game changer. So now you can't, really what we're doing is we're making it a level playing field for marijuana in general, and they can't pick and choose as to which laws they're going to follow and which laws they're not going to follow. Marijuana will be legal in a way that has not been, for pretty much the history of all of us in this room.
Jocelyn?
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Jocelyn Monahan. I'm an attorney. Primarily as an attorney, I do real estate work, and I'm telling you that because given the way the Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act in Michigan regarding medical marijuana was drafted, real estate started to become really important to people who are interested in medical marijuana businesses. So as an attorney and a real estate attorney, I also do work in the cannabis industry. And so I think, and I raise that because you guys are students and you're learning how to think critically, and your moderator emphasized that this is all about civic engagement and educating yourself and making good decisions. And if you've taken debate classes or research methods classes or statistics classes or whatever, you learn that one of the things to analyze when you get information is the source, right? So know that my bias is going to be as someone who's an ACLU volunteer, so civil liberties matter a whole lot to me, right, just as a person, and I do practice marijuana business law, okay? So that's my bias. Dr. Detman's bias might be different, certainly as a prosecutor. Mr. Becker has his own biases, as will Mr. Farage. So I just point that out because I think it's important to be really transparent, not that we weren't, but maybe just to highlight it to you guys as students and people who are learning today. But that's not why I'm here. I guess I'm here mostly because of my passion for civil liberties and the unique intersection between the regulation of marijuana and the prosecution of it and civil liberties. And I'll be real quick, but in the beginning, Mr. Cortade said we want to avoid politically charged statements. And unfortunately, when you talk about marijuana, it's probably not super possible to do that because its criminalization in our country has always been for political purposes. And I'm going to read you a real quick quote, if I can find it, and then I'll pass the mic. Let's see. Bear with me, guys, sorry. If I don't have it, I'll find it on my phone. Let's see. So do you guys know who Ehrlichman is, John Ehrlichman? Anybody? Raise your hand. Nixon administration? Okay. I apologize, but this is the beauty of
And
the
if you want to bring in
postmodern
the
world.
sort of closing
Technology.
statements, we could do that as well.
Sure, we can pass it, and then maybe when I find it, but essentially the subject or the content of it is, Ehrlichman, after serving, I think, approximately 8 months in connection with the corruption of the Nixon administration and not getting pardoned by Nixon, made this statement to a reporter whose name is escaping me. He says, look, we know that the war on drugs was all political. We waged this war because we couldn't stop anti-war protesters from protesting because they had First Amendment rights. So what we did is we looked at other stuff that they did, other behavioral things that they did. We sought to criminalize it so that then we could raid their churches, we could disrupt their meetings, we could stop them from organizing, we could lock it up. So it was focused at hippies and African Americans. That's what the war on drugs, born out of the Nixon administration, was absolutely focused on. So I just want to highlight that when you talk about the origin, the historic origin in terms of time in the 60s and the 70s, it wasn't public health. It was never public health, and that's pretty well documented. So just keep that in mind throughout this conversation.
Great. Thank you all. So our first formal question, which is a big one, and apologies, I tried to get at all sides of the issue. Some of these feel like two-part questions and too big to fit into a minute to 2 minutes, but we will do our best. So first question, starting with Sandra. So what legal and economic difficulties would legalizing recreational marijuana create, and what would the government need to do to regulate the industry if it were legalized?
I think that, I'm not sure I'm going to answer your question exactly because it's kind of out of my purview, but the problem in terms of using it recreationally is we don't know how much is enough. I'm used to, as a physician, I write a prescription, I tell you how to take it, when to take it. I know how much because all the good studies have been done on how much. There aren't any studies to say, well, if you want to be mildly intoxicated, use this much marijuana. If you want to be moderately intoxicated, use this much marijuana. If you want to be trashed, use this much marijuana. So I don't really think there's any good studies to let people know what is a safe amount of marijuana. While it's true, and people argue that people don't die from overdosing on marijuana, that's very true. But what is a safe amount? I think it's going to be very confusing. I think we're pretty clear on how much alcohol you can drink and how long you need to wait before you drive your car. I don't think we have the answers for that on marijuana. And until we've done those studies and have those answers, I think it's going to be very difficult for people who are 21 years old and want to use recreational marijuana.
Thank you. Paul?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so there are many states that have already gone legal, and so we're now, I think there's 29 states. Michigan would then be the 30th state, and then there are 5 more on the ballot, so we'd be somewhere in there. A lot of these, quite a lot of that has already been figured out. As far as what would Michigan specifically have to do, and let me just say that there's so much. The big issue about this law enforcement thing, in terms of, what economic challenges legally do we have, is that basically it's who's going to get the money. And that's probably one of the biggest questions on the government's mind. That's why it's, if you just look at all the issues that have led up to this particular ballot proposal, this ballot proposal has gone through so many changes, and until they start putting in clauses that included big business, it did not get out of Lansing at all, and it did not get the support that it needed. I personally feel that the government should stay as far away from this as possible, but I know that they won't. Again, it has to do with money and all the money that is going to be generated. We're talking about billions of dollars in revenue for this industry. And so, when you have an industry that is generating so much money, that's when you have a lot of people then you bring about a lot of corruption. Legalizing marijuana and getting it to be deregulated as much as possible is really probably the best and safest way to keep marijuana and the people who use it safe, because then you don't have a bunch of hands trying to take a piece of the pie, and that's where you have a lot of the problems is in terms of the regulation itself. So that's basically how I feel is that marijuana should be deregulated almost completely, and then an industry will grow, and it will be a safe industry. because marijuana really, when it comes right down to it, is not that dangerous. It's just like anything. It's needs to be used with responsibility, but nobody has ever died from smoking marijuana. The amount that you would have to actually consume, whether you smoked it or consumed it through an edible or a tincture, is 400 or 500 times the amount that you could actually put into your body. So I think that needs to be considered when we talk about marijuana is its level of toxicity and how dangerous is it really.
Thank you. Jocelyn's next.
Okay, so economic difficulty, I'm not going to comment on that because I'm not sure what economic difficulty there would be. I think from a legal perspective, there's the civil side and there's the criminal side. From the civil side, you have to come up with a regulatory scheme, and then LARA probably, or subchapter of LARA has to be created, be staffed to regulate, just like we have the Liquor Control Board, for example, or just like we have the Board for Medical Marijuana Regulation right now. So that would be on the civil side. I think what's really interesting that would happen were marijuana to be decriminalized or legalized would be on the criminal side. And I want to point out a couple of things. There's a study that the ACLU issued in 2012, I believe. And the title of it is The War on Marijuana in Black and White. And they came away with some really shocking findings, and I'm going to share 5 of them with you. And then I'm going to just conclude with kind of a summary of how I think that would impact criminal law, right? So from the ACLU 2012 study, The War on Marijuana in Black and White, they concluded over a period of, I think, 10 years that they looked at, I think it was 2001 to 2010, marijuana arrests, 88% of which are for possession, right? So not distribution, not dealing, not selling, not trafficking, not across state lines, not across international lines, just like having a seed in your car could be possession. You can ask Mr. Becker that you can get cited for possession if you have like a pinch of marijuana. Have risen, and that has risen since 2001, and right now possession accounts for over half of all the drug arrests in the country. So possession of marijuana is over half, just possession is over half of all the drug arrests in the country. So that's number one. Number two, there are extreme racial biases under which how marijuana possession laws are enforced. For example, in Michigan, if I'm caught with drugs, with marijuana, and a black woman's caught with marijuana, she's 4 times more likely to be arrested, okay? Now what happens when you're arrested is that all of a sudden, you're in the criminal justice system. And so whether you get bail is up for grabs, whether you get a good deal, whether you're incarcerated, whether you lose time, parenting time with your kids, whether you lose time at school and you fail a class, or whether you lose your job, are all up for grabs. And it disproportionately affects people of color, specifically Black Americans, as opposed to white Americans. Third, white and blacks, and here's maybe what you're all thinking, but do blacks use marijuana more, and so is the law really fair? It's really not, because blacks and whites use marijuana at comparable rates, and in fact, there's a slight uptick in white reporting of use and a slight downtick in black use, it seems, according to this study, at least. Racial disparities in marijuana possession arrests have increased, and Michigan actually is sort of one of the 4th worst performers in this regard, and it's seen a 149% increase in the racial disparity with which it enforces marijuana possession laws. So Michigan is not a good state to be black and in possession of marijuana. Overall, states spend about $3.6 billion on marijuana possession enforcement, and in Michigan, it looks like, according to this ACLU study, that Michigan in 2010 spent about $94 million if you consider police, judicial, legal, and corrections fiscal expenditures related to marijuana possession offenses. So that might go down if marijuana were legal. I think that would potentially be the impact. Hopefully, that would be the impact, right? That there would be less of a racial disparity. LARA is the Licensing and Regulatory Affairs Department in Michigan, so it's a state agency that regulates, like my license, for example, the doctor's license. If you're
All the marijuana licenses.
the marijuana license, if you're like a beautician, or if you're a real estate appraiser or a real estate salesperson, all those are LARA licenses. So it regulates. It does other things too. If you want to, start an LLC, you file it with LARA.
Yeah, we'll more or less hold the questions to the end, but that was a good follow-up for any like acronyms, anything that like affects your understanding of the question. We can have brief interjections. Chris.
Yeah, it's kind of nice going last because you get to hear everybody else and then kind of structure your thing. I guess starting from the last point regarding racial disparities, this is the one thing I'm trying to get across, and what we're as the Prosecuting Attorneys Association is that this isn't something we're going into blind. We see Colorado, we see Washington, it's been done out there, and what has happened out there, going specifically to the racial disparities, is that it's actually increased. Okay, if you look at Colorado, I have a statistic here that it's gone down 8% for Caucasian, while 35% for Latino youth and 58% for African American youth. Marijuana arrests have gone up in Colorado where they've legalized it. That was the great argument they used in Colorado, that it's going to go down. It's actually increased in Colorado. And in terms of possession, yes, she's correct. You can be arrested for possession of marijuana for just a pinch. Our office and many offices across the state, we don't write warrants for marijuana possession anymore. We haven't done it for almost a decade. It's not worth it. People weren't going to jail. Nothing was happening with them. It wasn't worth the paperwork to send it down to the office. So we tell, the police department's going to write a ticket, just like a ticket for, drunk driving or any other misdemeanor offense that you may have. But law enforcement, it's not something that drives the prison population. There's only, you can't go to prison for possession of marijuana. The most you can go to is county jail. It's a misdemeanor offense. So if you are going to prison, it's going for possession with intent to deliver, and even then, maybe only about 15 to 18% are actually going to prison for any sort of delivery of marijuana offenses. So the thing that we're wasting a whole lot of law enforcement resources on possession or marijuana offenses in general just is not the case. The big focus is opioid abuse and the heroin, and that's what the focus of the law enforcement is on. Going to the economic impact, yeah, that's one of the things they sell right now. The Colorado, the amount of money they're taking in is 0.9% of the Colorado state budget. It hasn't been a windfall. It hasn't been billions and billions of dollars. They were promised schools. The mayor of Denver has done an ad out in Arizona where they tried to legalize it, where it was shot down. He said they promised money for schools when they legalized marijuana. It didn't happen. It went towards homeless. It went towards combating the legal aspects of marijuana out there. And going finally with Dr. Detman, she's right. That's exactly the biggest thing we see from a law enforcement perspective is we can't treat this like alcohol. We don't have a PBT for marijuana. We're trying to do a pilot program for saliva testing for marijuana, but there's no 0.08 is a legal limit. We can't have a 0.05 or a 5 nanogram legal limit for marijuana because there's no science behind it. So we can't regulate it like marijuana or like alcohol because marijuana is very different, and it leads to a whole different set of circumstances for law enforcement on how do you protect the roads and the driving and people driving under the influence. We don't have a comparable measure to keep our roads safe.
Thank you all. Next question, starting with Paul. Medicinal marijuana often differs significantly or can differ significantly in composition from recreational marijuana that is still illegal, especially recreational that is bought on the streets. And so the THC content is something that can differ. So what needs to be considered from a health perspective before legalizing recreational marijuana as opposed to medicinal?
Marijuana, whether it's recreational or medical marijuana, is really the exact same thing. What you're seeing in a lot of states, however, is because there are so many more. First of all, let me just point out that once this ballot proposal passes, and I'm pretty sure it will pass, once it passes, that there will still be a medical marijuana side, and there will still be a recreational side. So any patient who is currently a medical marijuana patient will remain a medical marijuana patient. You will go to the same dispensaries with your medical marijuana card as you would, as you do now, but you could also visit the recreational dispensaries. There will be a tax on recreational marijuana. I think they're also trying to propose a tax on the medical, but it's not as much. So you would save a little bit of money if you stuck with the dispensaries. And usually the quality of the marijuana is a little better because you don't have as many customers, so there's not as much demand. So that really is the largest thing and the difference when you say, like, well, what's the difference? Is that one is one is produced for a much larger amount of people, while the medical there's not as many patients, therefore the people who grow it can spend more time growing it correctly and give the marijuana time to cure, which is a big thing. It's like wine. You let it sit for a while, and then the marijuana becomes more mature and more cured. So you have time to do those things. what you see in a lot of states that have legal or recreational marijuana is that just like when you go to the store and you look at some of the fruit and the vegetables, it's just picked too early, so it's just not as strong or as potent. What I think that needs to be done on both sides, the medical and the recreational side, that is really kind of should be mandatory, and it is written in the law, and that is testing of the marijuana and also labeling, so that you have a very clear label right on the package that says exactly what it is, what's the content, what's the THC, CBD, all the compounds, the dosage and things like that. That really would be, that's really the most important part, so that one, you're getting a good high quality product, and two, that you know exactly what's in it. As far as the THC content and things like that, that's more of the way that it's grown and the maturity level, because you're growing all the same plants, you're growing all the same strains, and you have really predominantly an indica, which is considered the more sleepy type, the spacey marijuana, and then you have the sativa, which is considered the upper, the more kind of giggly marijuana. So those, you're still going to have all of that. It's just how well the person or the company that grow it, how much care did they take into growing it to get the end product.
Thank you. And Jocelyn is next.
Great. So I think, just to follow up on what you said, I think labeling's critical, right? So put a label on recreational marijuana, and then you'll know what's in it. You'll know the strength, you'll know the components, you'll know what strain it is, what the hybrid name is, et cetera. I think there's been a little talk about dosing and things like that, and I think that obviously, if it were descheduled federally, we could learn more. I think it's incorrect to say that there aren't studies. There are surely studies. There are a lot of studies out of Egypt, really good studies, a lot of studies out of Israel. There's a lot of good studies out of other European countries. There's a lot of good data out there about marijuana. It's not an unknown. I think, frankly, if you've seen pictures of what I believe, if it's the FDA, I think the FDA has like some marijuana from like God knows when, and that's like what it holds up is like, this is our sample of marijuana, and it looks like dried thyme or something. It's like this really old, like fine powdery stuff, so there's this huge just factual disconnect between the studies that are being done in countries that have, I think, a more sort of sophisticated adult view of marijuana, and countries, frankly, like ours, who have a little bit of a sort of knee-jerk, slightly culture war aspect to marijuana. So I think labels, more studies, look to other countries who know what they're doing, just like we do with other kinds of medications.
Thank you. We'll head over to Chris.
I'm kind of looking at the next question. I'll probably, whatever answer I have is probably better for the next question, so I'll pass it to Dr. Detman.
Okay, fair. Thank you.
When we talk about the difference between medical marijuana and recreational marijuana, they seem to me that they're about the same, because my profession has made a mockery out of medical marijuana. Do I believe that there are people who benefit medically from marijuana? Absolutely. Children with Dravet syndrome, for example, with incalcitrant seizures. But what we've done is we have guised recreational marijuana and called it medical marijuana. I can almost guarantee you, today is September the 19th of 2018. Were I to choose to write for medical marijuana cards, I believe I could walk out that door, come back on September 19th of 2019 with $1 million cash. The way medical marijuana has been in this society, we've got doctors who set up a van outside. If someone shows up and they're 22 years old and they want medical marijuana for chronic pain. Well, what happened? Well, when I was in 5th grade, I was kicking a soccer ball and I hurt my left great toe and it still hurts. And boom, 3 minutes, they pay a lot of money and they get a medical marijuana card. And, I don't like that, because remember what I do for a living. I help people get off of opiates and alcohol. So yes, I do see the extremes, but they talk about marijuana as a gateway drug, and people say it's not a gateway drug. I don't know what the study shows, but I know that I spend 50, 60 hours a week with opiate addicts. They tell me it's a gateway drug. So I think what happens is we guise it as it's okay because it's medical marijuana. And I come to believe that it's something that my profession has made a mockery out of, and it's about making money. And don't get me wrong, I think that there are indications, but they're pretty rare. I have a patient that I'm treating with Suboxone for opioid dependence. We got him off of opioids. He still has chronic pain. He gets injections. He sees a pain management specialist. I actually asked him to go get a medical marijuana card, and he did. And he used it for about 6 months, and he came in the other day, and he goes, I don't really think this is doing anything. I don't need this anymore. So I always get upset when we talk about the difference between medical marijuana and recreational marijuana, because I think they've become one and the same. And the problem is, and I might be getting a little off track here, we all want something to make us feel better. Living life on life's terms is difficult. Life on life's terms sucks. We get flat tires, we miss appointments, we get speeding tickets, we forget to pay bills, and we want something to make us feel better. I don't think that marijuana is the worst drug out there. While it's probably not going to kill the person who is using the drug, it's hard to overdose on marijuana, it's the behaviors associated with that cause the problem and make it unsafe for our citizens. It scares me that people are out there driving 2-ton vehicles with marijuana on board. And secondly, I've yet to see it add anything positive to anyone's life. People don't come in and say, guess what, doc? What? Well, I started smoking marijuana, and I told my boss, and I got a raise. And I told my wife, and she's back. And I got into medical school because I told them I was smoking marijuana. I don't see it as adding anything positive. What we want to do is rather than cope with life on life's terms, we want to dope. We don't want to feel it. We want something to make this life easier.
All right, thank you. The next question, as you noted, is a little similar, at least in similar train of thought. So feel free to kind of pass on or be a little brief because we are going a little over on time here. So the next question is, how would the legalization of recreational marijuana impact the medical marijuana industry, so on the business side of things? And we will start with Jocelyn.
I think it's really hard to say. I think right now it seems to be set up to be regulated differently, so there'd be a different application process to be able to participate in that business if you want to, sell recreational versus marijuana. I think, you can look to other states and maybe get a sense there. I don't, I think it's an open question. I think some municipalities feel like, oh gosh, everything medical is going to be really different after recreational, and I think that's an unfounded fear because quite clearly there are different laws that are going to apply to recreational and different to medical. I don't know. I don't know what will happen.
Thank you. Popping over to Chris.
And that's why I want to pass, because I have a direct talking about Oregon legalized it, and I have an article here from The Guardian. I thought The Guardian was a British newspaper, but I don't know if it's Oregon. But they have an article from July of this year that says how legal cannabis actually made things worse for sick people in Oregon. And I quote from that article, Oregon's medical marijuana market has been on a downward spiral since state legalized cannabis for recreational use in 2014. In essence, in the shuffle, recreational marijuana turned into a $1 million industry in Oregon, while the personalized patient grower network and the medical marijuana dried up. So, once again, you look at what's happening in other states, and you can't say, well, Michigan's different. How are we going to be different than that? How, it had an impact in Oregon, and it's driving the medical marijuana industry into the hole, while everybody's going for the money and the recreational marijuana. And I echo a lot of what Dr. Detman said, because I was thinking of the same things in terms of what happens here is, I always tell people, medical marijuana is a whole different animal, and we're on the opioid things and Families Against Narcotics, and that's a huge problem with us right now, and talking about a gateway drug or whatever. But when you look at what happens with marijuana, and what's the term I'm looking for here? It's something where you've got to pay attention to, how marijuana is started and medical marijuana when you have 15% of the medical marijuana cards being issued out of a appliance store in the city of Lansing, and that was an article way back. They've turned it into it's just something to get high and not necessarily paying attention to medical marijuana. There are people that are helped by medical marijuana, and we want to get those people help, but instead they've used it as kind of the nose under the tent of the camel getting the nose under the tent and just turning it into a way to get high. And so if we can keep a focus on medical and we want to get to help those people and keep them off opioids and people that are truly in need of it, but unfortunately that's not happening when you're getting people in an appliance store getting medical marijuana cards, as Dr. Detman described, like candy. That's impacting and hurting the medical marijuana industry, and I think recreational legalization will further injure the people who truly need marijuana for whatever illness they have.
Next, Dr. Detman. Sorry, I should have given you all the order. It's kind of randomized on the
Oh,
sheet.
no, that's right. I echo what Mr. Becker said. I don't have anything to add to that.
Okay. Over to Paul.
Okay, I'm just going to say something real quick, but I'll speak more about it in the next question because it kind of like touches on that. Is that, once again, you have to, if you have, obviously there's going to be a big impact on the medical marijuana industry because it's kind of like you have a mom and pop store and all of a sudden Walmart comes in or Sam's Club that's offering something at, like more variety and less cost. Marijuana, like I said, is marijuana, so it doesn't matter whether it's medical or recreational. Obviously, people who are now, like the prosecutor and the doctor said, is that, hey, if a doctor comes in a van and opens his door and you have a bunch of people who just want to smoke marijuana, so they say, well, hey, I stubbed my toe and I scratched my leg, and then the doctor signs the card, they're not going to need that card anymore. So yes, there's going to be all the people who were getting the card just to smoke marijuana legally. Those people will go to the recreational dispensaries and they'll end up doing that because it's just less hassle. However, I will tell you this is that last year we saw almost 5,000 patients. At least half of them are over 50 years old. At least more than that are desperate because they have gone through the medical industry, they've gone to the hospital, the doctors, they've done everything that they were supposed to do, they've taken all the pills, the prescriptions, and they still don't have problems, or they still have problems. In fact, a lot of them have more problems because they get a prescription, there's side effects to the prescription, they get another prescription, and they are just blown away that marijuana is helping them. And these are people, like I said, that are over 50. We're told their entire life marijuana is the gateway drug to heroin, and we're terrified. So I would just like to see that this whole hysteria on marijuana just kind of just fade away, and it's just not going to be looked at as such a horrible thing.
All right, thank you. Next question. So what challenges would Michigan face if it legalizes marijuana while the federal government is still classifying it as a Schedule I drug? So the difference, if it were to be passed, of having it legal at the state level versus the federal level. And with the trends of state legalizing it, do you believe that the status will continue, whether the illegality federally or at least the classification of Schedule I? Sorry. Starting with Chris.
Your guess is as good as mine. I think that's probably I don't know how anybody else can have an answer. I know the Trump administration's been very active in saying they're going to be combating marijuana and going after it even in states where it's legal, but I have not seen any evidence of it happening. There have been random searches or seizures of marijuana plants, big operations where they're growing, marijuana can grow as big as trees. And so they have done that in certain states, but it hasn't been at a level that I'm aware of that's, shut down anything or caused any of the legalization states to do anything different. Obviously, in 2 years, there could be a different president and a whole new attitude. So it's really hard to say. As of right now, there's nothing that's going to change marijuana from being illegal federally on the horizon.
Dr. Detman.
I agree. I think we just don't know. It's very confusing, though, how something can be legal at a state level and then illegal federally. I've never understood that. Again, out of my purview, but I don't think we have any good answers to that.
Okay, this is a very good question, and this is pretty much where we have the biggest issue with marijuana in itself, is that you have you have a substance that was created illegal for to control groups of people. And not only that, they targeted groups of people, in particular the black communities and the hippies and the Vietnam vets, and then they used this particular substance so that they could what was already talked about, getting a warrant to search their house, pulling them over. Oh, you have a joint in the car. Now I'm going to arrest you and take away all your rights. So we have taken this substance and then we have used it to literally strip us of our constitutional rights, and it is completely being a blind eye has been turned, and this is a huge problem. Marijuana should not be Schedule I. It is obviously a medicine. The U.S. government has a patent on marijuana. In 2003, they have a patent on it for epilepsy and seizures and Parkinson's. So if the federal government has a patent on something that they say is a medicine for these particular illnesses, then it must be a medicine. You don't get a patent on something unless there has been a lot of research and you have proof that you can use it for this particular thing. But yet, it's still Schedule I, which means it has absolutely no medical value and it's extremely dangerous. So, and I do see that all ending. I see that the government is going to be forced into rescheduling marijuana. It's a no-brainer. I mean, we are the only country, if you look around the world, research, like Jocelyn said, in Israel and in Egypt, around the world, Germany, they are doing amazing studies with marijuana. They are showing how powerful it is as a medicine. And here we are, supposed to be the largest, most free country in the world. And we're saying marijuana is the gateway drug to heroin, and it has no medical value whatsoever. It just makes us look stupid, really. And the rest of the world is kind of just just laughing at us. And I disrespect that. We are a great country. Don't get me wrong. America is a great country, and we still can be, retain the greatest country, but we just have to get over ourselves. And I pretty much see that the Schedule I is going to come to an end because the government will have no other choice. And not only that, you're going to have over 33 states that are going to be legal, meaning that's 2/3 of the entire country have at least medical marijuana legal. So the federal government is going to have to act and reschedule marijuana altogether.
Thank you. And Jocelyn?
So I found my Ehrlichman quote, and so rather than really answer the question, I'm gonna say that that it should be descheduled, right? And so here's the quote. This is Mr. Ehrlichman, who was former domestic policy chief of President Nixon. So, quote, "The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people." Former Nixon domestic policy chief John Ehrlichman told Harper's writer Dan Baum for the April cover of the story published Tuesday. This is, I think, from last year. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about drugs? Of course we did, right? So if this is the underlying reason for the policy, do I think it should be descheduled? Yes, I do.
Thank you all. Next question, and a lot of you have touched on this as well, and I suspect you all have been very thorough, which is great. I suspect we'll have touched a lot of the questions by the time we get to them. So this next one, alcohol use is regulated to prevent overdosing, public intoxication, and operation of vehicles/machinery while under the influence, and this proposal is to regulate marijuana like alcohol. And so is there some way to measure and therefore regulate cannabis use to prevent people from being a danger to themselves or others? Starting with Dr. Detman.
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know that we've done any studies to say what is a safe level of marijuana. I think, again, it's not about the person dying from smoking too much marijuana. It's about the behaviors associated with someone who is intoxicated on marijuana. And I just see this as disastrous. I use the example. I'm going to a business meeting in Denver in a few weeks. I'm going to be there for 2 days. I could go to Denver if I chose to. I could smoke marijuana, and it would be legal. And then let's say I come back 3 days later, and I run over a pedestrian, and they test me, and they find out I've got marijuana on board. And I said, well, I was in Denver, and it was legal there. They don't know whether or not I smoked it right before I caused that fatal accident. So I think it's going to be very confusing to figure out what is, like Mr. Becker said, we don't know what is a safe level to where you can drive a motor vehicle. And I just feel like we're going to do this, and then we're going to try to figure it out. And I think that there's going to be the loss of life in between. And again, I do believe it's a gateway drug, and I know a lot of people don't believe that. I don't smoke marijuana. I have no desire to smoke marijuana. However, if my inner circle of people smoked marijuana, there is a good chance that I would smoke marijuana, because I firmly believe you become like the 5 people you spend the most time with. Well, if I smoke marijuana, I'm not going to have the judgment, clear judgment that I have right now. And if someone pulls out cocaine and says, hey, Sandy, you want some of this? There is a greater chance that I would do that, or use a syringe of heroin, for example, and then become dependent on that, which definitely is life-threatening. So there's a lot of argument out there that it's not a gateway drug. Again, I don't know, because I've not been in that position, but I do know what my heroin-addicted patients tell me. They tell me it's a gateway drug.
Paul?
Okay, so to just, to answer the question and not get into the debate about like how regulating or not regulating is a problem, something that you have to get, marijuana is a drug. There's no doubt about it. You use marijuana, and depending on the particular strain or the amount of the compounds like the THC and the CBD and things like that, you are going to get high, and it is going to alter your perception, and it is going to alter your judgment. That is no doubt. If you drive a car seriously intoxicated on marijuana, you could get into an accident and you could hurt yourself and other people as well. However, that being said, marijuana is not alcohol. Marijuana is not heroin. Marijuana is not PCP or anything like that, okay? Marijuana, for anybody who's tried it in this room, whether you're medical or just recreational, marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. You do not react the same way. I mean, the biggest problem with marijuana and smoking, and it's other than the, if you're intoxicated and you can't, and your perception in terms of driving, is that you're calm. You are not going to be violent. There is not a lot of violent people who smoke marijuana and go out and do violent crimes. That is probably, I'm sure there's somebody who's done that, but that is very rare. Okay, so marijuana is very different than these other drugs and alcohol. By the way, marijuana stays in your system for a long time. And if you had marijuana last night and you're driving and you get a blood test, it's going to show that it's in your system. It may show up in your system 2 or 3 days later. That does not mean you're intoxicated on marijuana just because it's in your system. Because you smoke marijuana, that doesn't mean that you're intoxicated to the effect that you can't function. So there is really no way to test marijuana, the level of toxicity, and to say, okay, now you're intoxicated in the same way you do alcohol. Yes, it's going to require responsibility, and that is something that we need to do as human beings. But what I really disrespect from government and authorities is that they act like I'm a child, I'm too stupid to figure out how much marijuana I've smoked and if I'm going to get behind the wheel of a car and endanger myself or somebody else. It does happen, plenty of drunk drivers on the road, but I think the reason we have so many issues is because we have so much government and so much regulation that they just basically treat us like we're their children, when really we are the government and they are just servants, public servants, helping us do what we have already set up in the Constitution.
Jocelyn is next.
Okay, so the first sentence of the question says, alcohol use is regulated to prevent overdosing, public intoxication, and operation of vehicles, machinery while under the influence. And so I think part of that sentence actually is incorrect. Alcohol is not regulated to prevent overdosing, right? I mean, there's no regulation that stops me from buying 5/5 of vodka or whatever and drinking them all right now, right? There's not a regulation. Public intoxication, well, that's a little different, right? Because I can drink and then I can at a bar and then I can be intoxicated and walk to my car or walk to my house, but it depends how I act while I'm doing it, right? So I think it's a little bit, I just want to be super clear about that. I think that it is true if the concern is, how do we measure how much of this mind-altering substance is in a human body? I think that's a question, right? And we do have ways, some experts would say they're not always reliable, but we do have ways of measuring that with respect to alcohol in a human body, right? So we have less ability maybe and less studies that tell us what certain levels do to people. But I think that's just an empirical question. So we'll just do more studies, right? Or we'll just look to other countries who already have. I think it gets, where the rubber hits the road a lot more is for Mr. Becker and in his law enforcement role. I think just for, I guess, students, for the educational piece and maybe for the ballot, I mean, consider the other things that we don't measure the effects of in a human body, like Vicodin and codeine and too much coffee, and where you're so jittery. I mean, these are things that we don't talk about, but certainly affect safety in driving. So it's a great question. I don't think it's a question unique to marijuana, and I don't think it's a question that is without an answer with respect to marijuana.
Chris?
Sure. And that's, going to, that is where the rubber hits the road for me, obviously, because that's the biggest problem we see from a public safety perspective is, we're not we trust you and you can smoke all the marijuana you want and stay in your house. It's a problem with there are too many people that smoke marijuana or alcohol and get behind the wheel of a car and kill and injure people, and that's our concern. And recently, if you looked last year, drugged driving surpassed drunk driving as the #1 cause of fatalities and accidents in the country. So we're now increasing the marijuana aspect of marijuana, that people are going to have access to marijuana and have the ability to drive while impaired, and that is a problem. We can't measure it. There is no way to measure it. Alcohol has the bell curve. You start drinking and it gets up and gets in your bloodstream, and then you stop drinking and it hits, and then it starts going down. And you're exactly right that marijuana is very different. It stays in your body for 2-3 days. And so how do we tell if you smoked it 2 hours ago or 3 days ago, and we don't have a level? 0.08 for alcohol is the legal limit. Well, some states have gone 0.5 nanograms for marijuana, but they're just making it up. They just pulled that number out of thin air because it sounds good and it's kind of comparable to what alcohol is, but there's no studies that say 0.5. Actually, studies have said the lower the nanograms is actually more impaired because the way the marijuana is absorbed in the body, it's different from alcohol. So we're just creating numbers and creating things, as Dr. Duttman said, making policy and not putting it forward and just, let's see what happens and figure it out. Meanwhile, we're putting people at risk that are out there driving and on the roads in Michigan, and that's our biggest concern from law enforcement.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I think we'll skip the next question. I think it's been touched on by most folks on the panel here. So the next question was, given the limited research, at least within the United States, do we have enough to say whether marijuana is as safe or safer than other legalized substances like alcohol or tobacco? But I think that's been touched on. So in the interest of time, we'll move on to question 8. So question 8 is, if legalized, do you see potential concerns that a big marijuana industry could take over marketing to vulnerable populations just as big tobacco did when it was first created and envisioned? Starting with Jocelyn.
I don't know. It is pure speculation, right? Certainly it could. I guess the hope would be that since it happened once, our lawmakers would have their, eyes on the ball and let it not happen again. And right? I mean, we learn from our mistakes, one would hope. Maybe if the lawmakers if we don't think or observe that they're doing what they ought to be, maybe voters will be more involved. But I think it's just speculation, really. I hope it doesn't happen.
Chris?
Sorry, I seem to be disputing you quite a bit here, but I think it will happen. I think it will happen because you look at, once again, what happened with medical marijuana here in the state. Big companies came in. Kingsley, everybody been at Kingsley? It's up as you go into Traverse City when you hang a left at M72. I mean, it's a tiny town. It's not even Cedar Springs size. It's tiny. And what's a marijuana coming out of Canada? Ever something. It was a big marijuana. It's a big marijuana firm that came in and was going to build a medical marijuana facility. And it was a big company. They're coming in here. I don't remember the company, but they're
The Canadian company.
some Canadian company. It was a Canadian company that came into Kingsley, Michigan, which is way up north, and it's happened in Michigan. And you talk about the east side of the state, it's happened over here. And I think some of the reason they're delaying the city marijuana thing is that they're concerned about the big entities coming in here. So I think the big companies will come in here, and there's a interesting YouTube Big Marijuana 2.0 or Big Tobacco 2.0. It's on YouTube, and it talks about how the similarities between big tobacco in the 70s and big marijuana industry and the similarities between the two. It's an interesting thing to watch.
Dr. Detman?
100%. I think that big business will capitalize on this, especially since I'm of the belief that there is a cannabis dependency syndrome. So I believe that the people who are selling the marijuana, if they can, advertise and they'll flavor it and they'll make it attractive to the younger population, because if they can get you hooked on it, just like tobacco, they've got you and they're going to make more money. Absolutely, I think they will capitalize on that.
And Paul?
It's sometimes hard to see the lines between big business and big government. Basically, if you, like I mentioned right at the beginning, this particular ballot proposal has gone through 5 or 6 revisions. Originally, it was a very well-written law that allowed recreational marijuana, and it was much, much better than the law that is going to the ballot today. It has been now, this particular ballot has just been packed full of big business, big pharma, big industry. Why? Because guess what? In 1937, when marijuana was made illegal, I'm not going to get into the details, but anyway, it was going to be $1 billion industry then, in 1937. So can you imagine the billions of dollars we're talking now? Not just in marijuana smoking. I don't know if any of you are aware of this, but you can make gasoline out of marijuana. You can make plastics. You can make all kinds of products. By the way, the plant that makes the products, when you grow up for those materials, you can't smoke, but that's illegal too. So you have to ask yourself, why is a plant illegal that you can't smoke and doesn't get you high? So you have billions of dollars in this industry in terms of just products, plus the medicine, plus the marijuana smoking, plus the recreational smoking. Of course, you're going to have big business.
Thank you. Next question, second to last, by the way, if you're counting. Given national trends of legalization, does drug law enforcement need to be revisited in Michigan regardless of the outcome? And then likewise, if marijuana becomes legal in the state of Michigan, what could that mean for individuals who have already been convicted for illegal drug offenses? Starting with Chris.
I guess, in terms of that question, one of the biggest, I think I've touched on it before in terms of the legalization and how somehow that we're, spending a whole lot of time in law enforcement dealing with marijuana crimes. We're not. Just look at the simple prison statistics. That's one of the things why we're locking a bunch of people up for marijuana. Only 8% of the drug crimes in the state of Michigan are in prison for that. 8% of felony crimes go to prison for drugs. And that's all drugs. Marijuana, heroin, methamphetamine, whatever it may be, only 8%. There's only 3 people they can trace in prison right now that are there for possession of marijuana, and the only way they're there is they're on parole for something else. So we're not incarcerating a whole bunch of people because of marijuana and getting in there. If it becomes legal and somehow, what do we do with all the people who have been convicted of possession or use of marijuana in the past? There's nothing in the ballot proposal, there's nothing in the legislature right now that would somehow retroactively go change all that. So those would remain in effect as far as I know, unless something comes on down the road and changes that.
Dr. Detman?
Out of my purview, I have nothing to add to that.
Okay. Paul?
I would just like to say, just to be very brief, is that I believe that I believe that the war on drugs as a whole should come to an end. I believe it's an illegal war against Americans, and as Jocelyn pointed out, it was started. It was started just to basically control people. It has nothing to do whether or not drugs are safe, or whether has nothing to do with health issues. So yes, most definitely, all the drug laws should be revisited, and they should be looked at from a scientific point of view and a health point of view, and not a political point of view or a financial point of view. Whether we like to believe it or not, the law enforcement is an industry. And in order for that industry to make money, it has to have customers, which are arrests and incarcerations. And while people may not be going to prison which is locked away for a while, they are still going to jail. We have plenty of people showing up at our door who have medical marijuana cards, who got pulled over by the police and ended up in jail. So, and why were they ended up in jail? Because they need it's a cash flow thing. So we need to look at law in general in our country and say, yes, we're human beings. We're not, we're not IBO codes, and we don't have like a barcode on our body that they just scan and here's the money. As far as Michigan goes, and what does it mean in particular, or anybody who has already been incarcerated for that, most definitely they should be released from prison because they were arrested for something that is no longer against the law.
And Jocelyn.
I guess I'll revisit a little bit what I said in the beginning when I talked about the racial disparity. I think there's a lot of empirical evidence from a lot of different sources that there is a huge racial disparity in how we prosecute marijuana possession. That exists in our state. I think we should care about that. I think that the answer to that disparity shouldn't be the disparity gets worse when recreational is legal. The answer should be, oh my gosh, it is awful that four more times will a black woman or a black man be arrested for possessing marijuana than me. I mean, that should be the answer. It should be, what are we going to do to fix it? It shouldn't be, boy, let's just make sure we don't do anything that makes it worse. We have a problem and we ought to fix it. And there's a traffic study that was done by an independent study group about a year and a half ago, and it studied traffic stops in Grand Rapids, and it was the purpose of it was to evaluate whether there was a racial disparity in Grand Rapids with respect to traffic stops. There was a bunch of, they concluded that there was, but there's one aspect of the conclusions that I want to highlight because I want you guys as Grand Rapids students to be aware of what the Grand Rapids Police Department is doing. So, and the data is about searches. It's about consent searches and probable cause searches. And so I'm going to try to make this statistically maybe more straightforward. But if you are an African American, and you're pulled over, the likelihood that you get searched in a probable cause search is 70%. If you're white, it's 29%. That was in 2013. In 2014, if you're black, you're pulled over, likelihood of a probable cause search, 67%. If you're white, 28%. Now remember, the other thing that's important to remember is that whites and blacks use marijuana or possess it at the same rate. And in this study that the Grand Rapids Police Department paid for, they found illegal items on blacks and whites with the same frequency, right? So you guys are, I mean, it's important for you guys to know about your city, I suppose, that our city is not unlike other cities where there is serious racial disparity in policing and in law enforcement. And hopefully that's something that we don't like. Hopefully that's something we disapprove of. Hopefully that's something we can raise our hands and admit we take part in and admit we're part of the problem and then go and try to make it better.
Thank you. Last formal question before we open it up to any questions that you all might have. So one of the arguments against legalization is that it could increase consumption, especially for those at younger ages, as it becomes easier to access. Would underage smoking of cannabis become a new public health concern like underage use of tobacco or alcohol? Starting with Dr. Detman.
I'm very concerned with the choice of the age of 21 years of age. The human brain is not like a computer. With a computer, we build the computer, we get all the connections made, we turn it on, and we use it. The human brain is functioning before it's completely built. The brain doesn't fully mature until about the age of 25. Some people say 26. So the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until, say, 25. The prefrontal cortex is the CEO of the brain. It's the executive decision maker. So I would much, we're not talking about the 55-year-old man who smokes marijuana with his wife and in his home, doesn't go anywhere. a couple of times a month. We're not talking about that. We're talking about people who do not have a fully functioning brain. Think about it. Women who are pregnant, we make sure they're very, very, very careful. Why do we do that? Because we don't want them to harm the developing fetus. What we seem to have lost here is that fetus, the development continues, the brains are pretty important until the age of 25. And I think we're remiss to add substances which can interfere with the development of the brain at the age of 21.
Thank you. Paul's next.
Yes, legalization will most definitely increase consumption of marijuana because there will be access to it and people enjoy it. Marijuana is a substance that makes you high. And I hear, a lot of the patients that come into the clinic say, well, I don't want to get high. I don't understand. What's wrong with being high? Okay, that doesn't mean that your perception is so diluted that you can't think or you can't be responsible. The reason that marijuana became popular is because it makes people feel good, it makes them feel relaxed, and it makes them feel at peace with themselves and their environment. And I really don't see anything wrong with that. And also I feel alcohol in a way does the same thing. Alcohol is far more toxic than marijuana and far more destructive to your body. You can, if you go out drinking and you drink too much alcohol, you're going to be very, very sick. If you smoke too much marijuana, you still could get sick, but you're not going to be vomiting and wishing that you were dead. So it's very different. The intoxication of marijuana and the intoxication of alcohol is very different. I don't see marijuana as being a dangerous substance to the effect that we need to be worried about people smoking, people using it. Even if there's an increase in marijuana use, I don't see a big problem in that. If you start smoking before school and you can't function in school, yeah, there's a problem. If you smoke and you can't function at work, yes, there is a problem with that. And I think that has more to do with, a social issue than it does to do specifically with marijuana and its intoxication. A lot of drugs and alcohol are abused because people do not like their life and they need an escape. So they start to feel good using this particular substance, and I feel good, I feel better, I forgot my problems. So they use more and more and more, and then it becomes a habit-forming thing. So we should be asking the question is what can we do to make our lives better without using substances instead of blaming the substances and saying, well, this substance is a problem because people's lives suck. As far as kids using marijuana, there are plenty of patients who come into our clinic, they're children, and they're using marijuana, and they are using it safely. I do not condone the use of marijuana for minors to just say, oh, yeah, it's perfectly okay, go ahead and smoke that or consume that. But the idea that marijuana is dangerous for kids in a way that, heroin or any other, like an opiate, even like the prescription medication, marijuana is not as dangerous. I have plenty of patients who come into the clinic and they're on plenty of prescription drugs that are harming them, that are making them sick, and they barely help their condition, and they are safely using medical marijuana. So I think that the idea of the hysteria needs to be removed and then looked at marijuana as what it really is. It's a medicine. It can help us feel better as a recreation, but it should not be abused.
Jocelyn is next.
All right, so the question is, would underage smoking of cannabis become a new public health concern like underage use of tobacco or alcohol? So I guess if people are using it underage now, I guess that's a concern. I would say that, I guess the point that I'm going to try to make is, if it's regulated and people who are selling it legally and have a stake in keeping that license to keep that income stream, I think that there's a greater likelihood that fewer underage people are going to get their hands on it. And I would ask you to reflect in your brains to when you were under 21 and try and remember, was it easier to buy marijuana or was it easier to buy a beer? I think that that underage use of drugs, it exists in the world. I think that regulation diminishes underage use of drugs. Chris?
Once again, the overwhelming answer is yes, it's going to increase minor use. When you look at, once again, Colorado, I go back to the Colorado average, 12 and older, 12. I have a 11-year-old, she's in 5th grade, so we're talking 6th graders. 6th graders, 85% higher in Colorado for 12 and over using marijuana. Do we want 12-year-olds using marijuana? I don't think so. And it's not just the smoking. That's the focus. It's the edibles. We've got the gummy bears, the candy bars, we've got suckers. I've got pictures back in my office of SpongeBob SquarePants marijuana suckers. Kids are going to have access to that, and they're not going to know. They may, and the accidental exposure to edible marijuana has gone up over 100% in Colorado because kids are eating gummy bears, not knowing their mom and dad's marijuana gummy bears. So that's the problem we run into. And when you look at it, the American Academy of Pediatrics has come out against it. The American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry has come out against it. I mean, these are, they don't have any political bone to pick. They're saying this is not good for kids. You don't want to have kids in the substance. 50% of fetuses in the city of Denver are now testing positive for marijuana. That is not good public health policy, and that is not something we want here.
Thank you. That concludes the formal questions. We'll give them a chance to do their final closing statements. But first, we want to open it up to any questions that you all might have here in the audience. And I will pass the mic on. I know it seems silly because it's a smaller room, but again, we want to make sure that it is picked up for the recording. So, hands? I see some inquisitive faces. Not sure if you want to raise your hand. All right. Great. Perfect. Thank you.
So do you think that, if marijuana is legalized, would that decrease the use of other kinds of, I guess, like vapes or anything like that? Like right now we have a huge, Juul epidemic with middle schoolers, high schoolers everywhere using Juuls and stuff like that. Do you think that would decrease, the use of nicotine and stuff like that if marijuana is, I guess safer than other types of drugs? Would that be, I guess, just better for the kids? Or anyone of our age really, because when you start smoking, you can get that nicotine addiction, and there's a lot of people these days that have that nicotine addiction at much younger ages, and would the legalization of that kind of move over from using Juuls to marijuana, where marijuana gives you a better buzz for less cost of your body, basically?
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in. I've never seen any studies that reflect that somehow, it improves somewhere where people start using marijuana. And I go back to going to some studies. The American Society of Addiction Medicine and the Committee of Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, I know that drug treatment professionals, people who work in drug courts and so forth, came out against the legalization of marijuana. So in my view, if there was some sort of benefit that say, hey, we're getting people off of one drugs and this is a less harmful drug, they would have said, hey, we're able to lessen the problem. They would come out and support and say, yeah, legalization, but they haven't. They've come out against it for many of the same reasons Dr. Detman has. So I've seen no studies that reflect that, and just logic says if there was some benefit to marijuana where they're getting them off other drugs, these drug experts would have not come out against it.
Paul's ready.
Yeah, let me just answer that real quick. There are studies done, in particular about marijuana, whether it takes you off of other drugs. In particular, the gateway drug to heroin actually gets you off heroin, and that is a study that they did in Colorado. 25% of the heroin addicts stopped using heroin because of the legal marijuana. The thing is this: they want to get high. They want to escape their life, and maybe that's one of the only things available. So now that there's other drugs available like marijuana, then they might just take a disinterest in something like heroin, which is much more toxic and much more dangerous. In terms of just the tobacco, a big part of tobacco's issue and why it's toxic is the chemicals that are put in it by the big chemical or the big companies. They specifically engineer tobacco to be addictive. So there are chemicals in there that are dangerous, probably as dangerous or more than the tobacco itself or the nicotine or the tar, things like that. So as far as this, people saying, oh, I don't want to smoke the Juuls now, I'm going to smoke marijuana. they'll probably do both or one or the other. They give you different effects. It's a completely different type of feeling. But you will see people, or you will see some drug abuse, less drug abuse on the more dangerous drugs due to marijuana. That's, by the way, is my opinion.
People talk about using marijuana because they have chronic pain. I have yet to see an opiate addict stop using opiates because marijuana was controlling their pain. Generally, they use both in combination. And just to clarify, most people who use heroin are not using it to get high. It may start out as that, or it may, 86% of heroin addicts started with dependency on prescription drugs. People don't come to me. By the time they get to me, they're not using heroin to get high. They're using heroin not to be sick. It's not about getting high anymore. It's so they don't have to go through the horrific opiate withdrawal. But I tell you, opiates is what's really killing people. If I thought that the use of marijuana got people off of opiates, I'd see it a little bit differently, because I definitely agree that opiates is what's killing our babies. But I don't see that happening. I see people addicted to opiates and adding marijuana, not changing to a safer drug.
So just something that occurred to me when you're asking that question. First, I don't know what a Juul is because I'm a dork and I'm old. I have no idea. But it does occur to me that I work with a lot of physicians and my clients consult with a lot of physicians. And I think that we're certainly hearing your perspective, but I think that the question like that would be great for a handful of physicians, because there surely are some who have, a different view than maybe that you've heard
Sure.
today. I think it's, just like I'm not like a block of all civil lawyers. Mr. Becker, it does not represent all prosecutors. Dr. Detman does not represent all doctors, right? So we're just a segment. I think, it's a great question. I don't have an answer at all, but other people probably do.
No, that's a great point. This is just a start for you all to go off and do more research of your own, too. So, yes.
Mr. Becker, you mentioned just a comment about the raise in drug driving. You said, was it drugged? Right?
Drugged
yeah, drugged
driving
compared to
as opposed to
drunk
drunk.
driving. Yeah, was that specific to just Grand Rapids or Michigan
nationwide.
or nationwide? And was also, were they able to relate the drugged specifically to marijuana, or was it
It's
just
all. Just
drugs?
any drugs, and then even prescription drugs. You can get high even though they're prescribed. Vicodin or whatever if you
Sure.
drive under the influence. So
And that
it's
study,
all
I'm just
drugs.
curious, can you, was that source? Was that something that's actually out there that
Run,
can actually?
heck, it was on NBC Nightly News. It's out there if you run something like that. It was about a year ago that all came out. That was the first time that drug driving surpassed drunk driving.
Okay, that was, just thank you. And if you guys want to respond to that, I don't know, but thank you.
Yeah.
So coming from my background, I have a dad and two brothers who are on the fire department back in my hometown, and I've noticed that there is a lot of underage drinking and driving, not a lot of issues revolving around doing marijuana or getting high and driving and crashing. Do you think if marijuana is made legal, there's going to be a lot less drunk driving, drinking underage, a lot less people, dying? Like, I've lost 4 friends to drinking and driving, so do you think this will cause some change?
I certainly hope so. If this reduces the amount of people in fatal car accidents from drunk driving, then I think that's a positive to making this recreational, to legalizing it for recreational use. I think we just don't know yet.
I go back to what's happened in Colorado. It's increased. The proportion of marijuana death traffic accidents have gone from about 11% in 2013 to 21% in 2017. So you have, if you have more access to marijuana, people are going to do it more and overuse and smoke and cause crashes. It's happened in Colorado. It's not. We're not immune. We're not any different. It's going to happen here.
I understand your question, and the thing is, alcohol is available. It's easily available, so people use it, and then when you get drunk, you really have a lot. You're really more willing to just do a lot of things you wouldn't do if you were not intoxicated, including driving. And with marijuana, it's similar, but because marijuana is different in terms of how you react, I don't believe personally, and I'm not debating the statistics, that there are more marijuana drivers that are getting into accidents. I believe that there are more marijuana users, and therefore it's in their system, and so that it's kind of being misrepresented. That yes, it's in the system, but it may or may not have had anything to do with the actual crash and the fatality. I would prefer to see people using marijuana over alcohol, especially teenagers, because it is safer altogether, and it does not alter your perception to the degree that marijuana does in terms of in terms of driving. When you're driving in the car and you're driving at a certain speed, your reaction time under alcohol is different than if it were under marijuana. So it's very different.
So something that just occurred to me, and I hadn't thought about it until you asked the question, and I listened to the other panelists, but we've kind of been, I think, a little maybe sloppy in how we're talking about, deaths, and what was in the person's body. I mean, I don't know if it's true that, the rates in Colorado for auto accidents are connected to people who only had THC in their body if they didn't have other drugs. I mean, it just seems like there's a lot going on. And I would just offer that the issue of being altered when you drive and hurting yourself or others, I don't know that it's one and the same with recreational marijuana. I think if you're conflating those and you're somehow saying that, there's some direct connection between, do you see what I'm saying? I think that there's a lot going on. And then you have to ask the question, I mean, underage drinking versus legal. I mean, there's just so much happening. I mean, it's a question about making good choices and driving safe or making other plans. I don't know that it's fair to link it as directly to recreational marijuana. I think that's wrong. I think it's wrong to link it directly to heroin or opiates or Vicodin or being tired or having your kids in the car or whatever. But I think it would be great to have a fact-based, open-minded, conversation about just that issue, right?
And if you have time to stay after for a couple minutes, we can do some more questions after the closing statements, but I want to be mindful for any folks that have to get to class or potentially back to work or home to their families. So we're going to start our closing statements. Everybody has a couple of minutes to kind of give a final thought here and final message to voters, and we're going to go in reverse alphabetical order by last name, starting with Jocelyn.
Awesome. Not even on topic. I just think it's great that you guys are here. I think that this is really important. We live in a democracy, and democracies only work when voters are educated and they're open-minded, and they go to a bunch of different sources, and they hear what they have to say, and they get behind the person. I mean, don't take me for my word for it. Don't take any of us. Figure out what our biases are and what our prejudices are, and do the same when you read articles, and do the same thing when you listen to the news. So it's awesome that you're here, and it's awesome to vote and be informed about it. So congratulations, and congratulations to your school to doing it. It's great.
Up next is Paul.
I also would like to congratulate all of you for coming here, and thank you for putting this together. Make sure, I know especially when you're younger and you're losing confidence in your government or just this planet, voting is a very important right, and even if there's nobody you like, I would suggest to go out and vote anyway or just speak up, because when you don't vote, that is really when you're making the biggest mistake. I have struggled with politics my entire life, and I don't believe politics is fair. I believe this whole issue on marijuana itself has been so disproportionately advertised that we really don't get marijuana, we really don't get what the issue is. And it really has to do with money because of the billions and billions of dollars that marijuana itself can generate. So just to quickly say that marijuana was made illegal not because of the marijuana, the medicine. It was made illegal because of marijuana, the hemp, which you can make anything out of. And because it grows so quickly and it does not damage the soil like so many other plants, and the reason it was made illegal right when it was is because they came up with a way to manufacture it very quickly. Before, you had to do it all by hand. It was very difficult. Do some research on hemp. Hemp has been a big part of our planet for a long time because you can make so many things out of it. But it is difficult to use and manufacture, to break down. In 1937, they came up with the machinery to do it very effortlessly and cost-effectively. So that's when it became illegal, because now the petroleum industry is in danger, the paper industry is in danger, any of the textiles industries are all in danger. You can make concrete, you can make fiber, you can make a fiberglass out of marijuana. In fact, Henry Ford built a car out of marijuana, a fiber, in 1925, and he fueled it with marijuana gasoline. So because of all of this, we have been misled to believe that this drug is so dangerous that even uttering the word is going to probably be damaging to you. And it's really politics. So I guess here's my point, is don't take anything at face value. Somebody is advertising something in a specific favor so that you will be swayed one way or another. Do the research on everything, and just be very thorough, because especially now, in today's day and age, there is so much misinformation and so many things like social media and the internet and television, which have become so good at controlling your thoughts that sometimes we're not even sure what the issues really are, and we're often swayed in the wrong direction because of our own inability to do the research ourselves.
Thank you. Dr. Dedman.
I think we get confused in terms of choosing the lesser of two evils. When marijuana discussion comes up, people always compare it to the use of alcohol, and it's less dangerous. And I have to agree with what was said about it being less dangerous. I'd much rather you pass me on the road intoxicated by marijuana than by alcohol. I agree with that. Generally, people who smoke marijuana, they're not out there committing crimes. They're not doing stupid. They're sitting on the couch eating Doritos, watching TV, and gaining weight. They're not going to school. The amotivational syndrome that we talk about associated with marijuana. But that doesn't mean that it's a good thing. I mean, we would all be against telling our loved one to smoke 3 packs of cigarettes a day, right? We would all agree that that's a crazy amount, and the risk of cardiovascular disease and cancer is going to be really high if you're smoking 60 cigarettes a day. However, as a physician, I still wouldn't advocate for you to smoke 1 pack of cigarettes per day. So I think we have to be careful when we say that it's safer than alcohol, but that doesn't mean it's the right thing to do and that it's safe.
Thank you. Chris?
I do want to echo a lot of what the other people have said. Appreciate you guys coming out and listening to this, and do your own research. This is something that's very important, and whatever you do, please go vote, because that's what many people have fought and died for, the right for you guys to do that. Just a couple things that I thought we haven't touched upon is the actual ballot proposal. One of the concerns we also have is if you look at the actual ballot proposal, we have the highest amount of personal ability to have it on yourself than any other state in the union that's legalized it. We have 10 ounces. 10 ounces at Oregon's at 8. I think Colorado's 2.5. The rest of them are allowed a personal amount on your possession is 1 ounce. So it's the highest amount that you can have, and we also have the lowest amount of taxes on it. It's only apparently a 10% excise tax. So highest amount, lowest taxes. So that seems quite a bit out of whack as well. And to echo some of what Dr. Detman said once again, in terms of the danger, it's still a drug. It's still a mind-altering substance, and it does have an impact on people. Do drive, people do stupid things with it, and it's not just this. It's no big deal. I think we have to be concerned, and we love it. Medical marijuana, hey, that's a whole different ballgame. But just recreational, so where people get high, the danger to the kids and the danger to the roads are the things that concern law enforcement.
All right, thank you. Please give them a round of applause. They deserve that after sitting up here for an hour and a half being grilled by me and you all. Thank you so much, Paul, Jocelyn, Dr. Detman, Chris, for taking the time today. They recognize the importance of education and civic engagement. So coming out and, as they said, educating yourself so that you can make the right decision for yourself come November 6th. So the election is November 6th, the midterm elections. This ballot proposal will be on it, as well as several others, and obviously political candidates, so please review them as well. If you're not registered to vote, we do have the Michigan Department of State coming on campus on the plaza from 10 to 4 on Monday. So thank you again to our panelists, and thank you to Media Communications for making sure this event could be recorded and happen as it is, and I wish you all the best. So thank you all for coming out.